Awesome, thank you, James. I didn't even do anything yet. Let's keep going. That's the best. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm sure you can especially hear me, so thank you. Again, I'm Nick with the Community Foundation. I want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We have a lot of history in this room, and it's exciting to see just so many friends and new faces that I've never met before, so I hope I get to talk to you soon. So tonight, we are going to cover a lot of history very quickly. Which means that a lot of the stories are going to be, left out of what we're talking about. And I wanted to start tonight by taking a stock of the history that's in the room, so we can get a sense of what sort of living stories we have here with us tonight. So we're going to start with a very easy exercise. Feel free to not participate, but I really hope you do. It's very easy. So if you are a member of the LGBTQ community, and have been in Arlington since 2025, raise your hand. Yay! See, we're off to a very easy start. This is the best. Also, if you work or volunteer in Arlington, that counts too. So we're going to take it back 10 years to when Paddington was first in theaters. Who was living, working, or volunteering in Arlington in 2015? Wow, still most of the room. That is very impressive. So we're going to take it back to when Borders was still in business at the Pentagon City Mall. Oh, yeah. Who was here in 2005? Raise your hand. This is really impressive. I was not expecting this. All right, we're going to up the ante. We're going back to 95. Who was here in 95? Okay, wow, look at this. Okay, we're going to lose some of you soon, all right? I promise. Okay, 1985. Who was in Arlington? Okay, all right. Really? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now the real challenge, 1975. Who was here? Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, that deserves a round of applause. Okay, so now we're going to zoom in on the Pentagon a little bit and go back to 1965. Was anybody here in 1965? All right, wow. 52? And you came out on a school night? Thank you for being here. So I wanted to do that because, like I said, we're going to cover a lot of history, but there are so many stories in this room that I hope that you connect with each other and learn about each other, and that this is a start of something moving forward. Because there are so many stories that are not told tonight. So back in this picture, 1965. This is the first known gay demonstration in Arlington at the Pentagon. And this was taken on July 31st, 1965. And before we talk about the specifics of this picture, I kind of want to set the stage for what it was like to be LGBTQ plus in Arlington in 1965. And to do that, we're going to use a backdrop of a documentary that was made by that woman right there, Lily Vincennes, who a couple years after this, she studied filmmaking, and she produced some of the earliest documentaries of gay demonstrations in the country, the first being filmed in 1968 in Philadelphia. So, in 1965, being LGBTQ was criminalized in the state of Virginia and Arlington. That is not a surprise. But what may be surprising is how far back that goes. To 1610, the Virginia colony. It was punishable by death. To even be suspected of having a same-sex relationship of some kind, and that was enforced. So that law changed in 1800 to where if you were a free person, it was no longer punishable by death, but instead by 10 years in prison. If you were enslaved, it was still punishable by death. So at this time in 1965, you could be denied housing, you could be denied employment, you could be denied benefits. God forbid you consider adopting a child. You could be denied an alcoholic drink at a bar or restaurant. And a bar or restaurant could lose their liquor license for serving not just homosexuals, but people who are suspected to be homosexuals. The American Psychiatric Association, a couple years prior to this, they released their first manual, and in it, they classified homosexuality as a, quote, sociopathic, disturbing personality. And, you know, we may say that about our exes these days, but it's not something that you want to say. Thank you very much, I appreciate the cackle. And at the time in 1965, this was at the height of police using tactics beyond just the formal laws, under an umbrella of the 3-article rule, which was to enforce, to harass, to stop and arrest people who did not dress according to their gender assigned at birth, or even if they just associated with those people in those spaces. And this was also at the height of police using entrapment tactics, especially here in Arlington, where they would go to gay cruising spots, especially for gay men, and they would go undercover, and they would lure men and then arrest them, even if they looked at them sideways, like even if they weren't actually doing anything. And very important to Lily's story is that this was the height of the Lavender Scare, which, starting in the 50s, thousands of federal and military workers were outed, investigated, and purged from the federal and military workforce, again, even just on the suspicion of being gay, because they were what was considered to be a security risk. We were, you know, at risk for being blackmailed by a hot general, I guess, is what the assumption was at the time. And so that brings us back to Lily. 2 years prior to this, she was outed by her roommate at the time and lost her job at Walter Reed with the Army. But see, Lily did not go quietly. That same year, she joined the DC Mattachine Society, which was one of the first gay activist groups in the US, and she became very actively involved very quickly. 2 months before this picture was taken, there was a picket at the White House. She was the only woman that was at that demonstration. And then when this picture was taken on July 31st, 1965, if you can see, they were protesting the Army policy at the time. And you might notice that they're all very nicely dressed, they're in a very straight line, the signs are pretty mild, they're just very straightforward. And that is because even though in our lives today, picketing, protesting is a very common part of a lot of our lives, and it's a chance to express your individuality and to write funny signs, at this time, there were very strict rules around it. It was totally new, it was totally unorthodox, and it came with a dress code, because that makes every protest really fun. But the idea behind that was that if you blended in with the straights, if you looked nice, if you said nice things, if you were pleasant, if you walked in a straight line, then maybe, just maybe, they would be more likely to accept the message that you were trying to share. And that was successful to an extent. But even when they did everything to a T, there was pushback, and not just from straight people, but from the gay community, because again, it was unorthodox. So some gay critics said that this was ridiculous, if not utter insanity. We're not ready for it yet, and dirty, unwashed rabble are thought to do that kind of thing, because obviously, if you see those pictures, they were dirty, unwashed rabble. But the thing is, like a lot of gay empowerment activism, the people that were actually there had a very different experience. They say, today I lost the last bit of fear. This was the proudest day of my life. And today it was as if a weight dropped off my soul. And if you look at Lily, I mean, that is the face of somebody who has lost a weight off their soul. And that is something that she said throughout her entire life. And after this picture was taken, over the next couple of years, as I said, she started creating documentaries, some of the earliest documentaries around gay demonstrations in the US. So the first being in 1968 in Philadelphia, the second being in 1970 in New York, on the first anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. And one of the things that was happening in Virginia at the time was the censor boards could restrict ban, destroy any sort of media content that promoted homosexuality in any sort of positive light, including this sort of content. And so what Lily did was she would show these films in her Arlington home when institutions around Arlington would refuse to show them. So her home became a safe space for this new cultural identity that was growing in the 70s. Now, as I mentioned earlier, starting in 1971, her Arlington home took on even more meaning with the Gay Women's Open House that started in 1971 as a response to gay and bisexual and closeted women who feel like they did not have, well, they didn't just feel like, there was no safe space for them. And so Lily created one. And she did this almost every Wednesday for almost 10 years in her Arlington home, which apparently was sold for like $8,600 back in the day, which is amazing. And at this open house, she had this guest book. And like I said, the guest book that we have tonight is an homage to those almost 10 years of Lily's Gay Women's Open House. But unfortunately, even though Lily was creating a safe space in Arlington, around that same time, not everybody had that safe space. And so this picture, taken on January 5th, 1972, is at the Iwo Jima Memorial Park. In the 5 months leading up to this picture, 8 undercover police went through the park and entrapped and arrested 60 gay men, or men who were suspected of being gay, suspected of cruising again. And you notice, if you look at this picture compared to the one in 1965, the dress code is a little bit different. And I know you can't see these signs, but they're much more expressive. They've introduced some humor. If you look at this one, when you can see the pictures up close, one of the signs here says, "Keep the fuzz in their own pants." And one of the other signs was reported to saying, "Don't expose yourself, you might be intimidated, you might be," what an officer, the word is failing me. Impersonating officer, thank you so much for the win. So again, the rules were changing and Sonal was a big part of that. And unfortunately, the police did not see the humor in the situation. And 6 protesters were arrested that night at Iwo Jima Memorial. And they were arrested for, quote, demonstrating without a license because, of course, I'm sure that's why they were arrested. But this was the first open revolt against these police tactics in the DC area. So this was a defining moment in sort of the queer rebellion that was happening at the time. We're going to continue on into 1981, which is when some community groups were starting to take root. And here in Arlington, that was through the Virginia Gay Alliance and the Arlington chapter. And now that group has changed name over the years. A lot of you know it as the Arlington Gay and Lesbian Alliance, or AGLA, and today is known as Equality Nova. And so when they were first started, they had pretty basic goals: community, visibility, and basic human rights. And in 1982, they had a very early accomplishment where they worked with then County Board Chair Ellen Bosman to secure getting an openly gay person appointed on a county commission, just one of the many dozens of commissions. And of course, there was pushback to that. This was the start of the AIDS epidemic and all the hysteria that came around that. But Ellen continued to be an ally to the LGBTQ community regardless of that. And you'll hear more about that in a second. So come 1985, Arlington had about 25% of the AIDS cases in all of Virginia. And despite everything that came with it, the members of AGLA, the Alliance, they continue to press forward in their advocacy. And if you look through these newsletters over here, these are original AGLA and Alliance newsletters from the 80s and the 90s and in the early 2000s. If you look especially during the 80s, it is heartbreaking to see how much AIDS dominated so many of the pages in these newsletters. I can't even imagine what it was like to go through that at the time. But more than the heartbreak for me is just the awe and the respect that I have for the people who lived through that and who got us through that to the other side, all while facing the stigma and the hysteria in their own lives. I mean, they didn't just work with the county and work with boards to address the AIDS crisis, but they also did things like providing gay awareness training for the police. They helped develop curriculum for the Arlington public school system that didn't stigmatize homosexuality for the first time. They hosted forums for candidates that were running for office. They hosted Lily Van Zens during the 80s who showed her films. So it's amazing that they got through this, and not just through it, but they did it with sass and with snark and with humor. And to tell us a little bit more about that, this is already been spoiled. I want to introduce our first speaker of the night, who from 91 to 93 was the president of AGLA. So please welcome James Fisher.
So, in honor of the history discussion, I decided that I would dress like I'm at the Pentagon in 1965. I'm so sorry that Donnell Robinson is not here, because I said this to him 3 weeks ago at the Equality Nova Ice Cream Social. Back in the 80s and 90s, when it was such an awful, awful time, and there were pages of obituaries every week in the Blade, and you saw people sick constantly, and everyone knew somebody who was sick or dying. There were probably in the Metro DC area maybe 20 people doing different kinds of things, different roles, who really brought us together and kept us together around that time. And one of those people was Donnell Robinson. You know, entertainers, particularly when there is, like now, for instance, when we're going through really horrible times, entertainers are so important. And Donnell Robinson was really the best and put so much effort and detail and everything into every performance. And so he gets big kudos for everything that he did. So I want, oh, there we are. I wanted to talk a little bit about how Arlington in the early 1990s came to achieve LGBTQ protections in the Arlington Human Rights Ordinance. So starting back in the mid-1970s, the African American community in Arlington was pushing for a human rights commission and was pushing for protections against discrimination in employment, in housing and education and other things. And it never really happened until February 1989, and it was spearheaded by Bill Newman, who was the founder of the Arlington Community Foundation. And so in February '89, the Arlington County Board held its hearing to approve the Human Rights Ordinance, and most of the public discussion was around, why aren't you including LGBTQ people? Of course, back then it was just gays and lesbians, but essentially, why are you limiting it? And the answer was, we are bound by the Dillon Rule in Richmond, which basically says you cannot provide protections locally that are not already provided at the state level. But they did say to AGLA at the time, look, if you can come up with some sort of legal reasoning that would give us the go-ahead to do this, we'll do it. And so in 1989, AGLA connected with the firm Skadden Arps, and they agreed to do pro bono research on an opinion. And right about that time, my husband Ron Bookbinder and I moved to Arlington, and I started becoming involved with AGLA, and this was like late '89, and by the end of '89, because this is how it works, I was president of AGLA. And so I decided, I felt like, okay, what should the agenda be? What do we need to do? And so I went and made appointments with every one of the county board members, and most of the appointments were pretty punctual. How do you do? Da, 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 da. And then I went to see Ellen Bosman. And I didn't know her. I'd seen photos of her. I maybe had seen a picture of her, or seen her in an event or something from across the room. And I just was like, okay, this is like your little sweet grandma, and this is going to be a nice little grandma conversation. Well, it was as if your little sweet grandma was Hillary Clinton. It was like that kind of conversation. And so immediately when I sat down, she was like, okay, here's the deal. If you want us to, as a board, to support this and take a risk, you got to get support in the community. You have to get people to support us doing this and to not be so antagonistic. And she said, here's what you should do. You should do community service projects around the county and work with other people. Let people see you and be next to you so they're not afraid of you. And you should go to the Arlington County Fair. So I thought, okay, let's do it. So we started in February of 1990. We started doing these community service projects. We with a whole bunch of volunteers from Washington Gas. We did a Christmas in April. We worked with the Boy Scouts and their parents to clean 4 Mile Run. We were kind of concerned, like, how's that gonna go? It was fine. And we did events for the library and a number of things. And at all of these events, we took photographs, because we were sort of working our way up to the county fair. And none of us had been, none of us really knew. It was like, are there cows there? Like, we didn't know like what that was about. So we got a booth, and it was about as wide maybe as one of these tables. And we had this giant 3-cornered screen. And so just to be a little provocative, at the top of it was this big sign that said, look what gays and lesbians are doing to Arlington. And then we had all these pictures of us cleaning the streams and doing all this stuff. And in the center was another big sign that said, they're making it better, exclamation mark. So we thought, okay, this is great, because who can object to this? Who's gonna have a problem with that? Well, it turned out a lot of people did. So we went the day before the fair opened. We went that morning, we took our stuff, we set up our booth and all this stuff. By that afternoon, I started getting calls from newspaper reporters. I did 2 print news interviews, a radio interview. People were freaked out because a lot of other people were setting up their booths, and the county fair people running the fair, and there we were, we had this booth. And they were all concerned about the children, like the children were going to see gay people, like we were going to, be in drag or God knows what. And so everybody was freaked out about it. And so, fair opened, and everybody wanted to come and see the Gay and Lesbian Alliance booth. And it turned out to be really wonderful. People stopped by who were gay or lesbian, and were so thankful that we were there. People stopped by who were not friendly, but okay, they looked at, here we were dressed like regular people, here we were cleaning the streams, and it's like, okay, what can you say? So, it was just, everybody came by to take a look, and that was a really good thing. And one of the things I remembered is there was a guy, big tall guy, bulky, and he looked like a truck driver, longshoreman, something like that, and he was sort of walking down, and I could see him coming, and I just thought, oh, here we go. And he walked by, and he looked over at me, and just went, and kept on going. And I was like, this is why we're here. This is the reason that we're here. And so we kept doing it. We kept doing community service projects, and then the next year we had another booth. We were still doing things to Arlington, but we had a map. And we asked anybody who was LGBTQ to put a pin where you lived in Arlington, and by the end of the fair, the whole map of Arlington was filled with pins, so people could see we're your neighbors. We live everywhere. And so we really did this to diffuse objections, build support, and so by November of that year, of 1991, we had gotten the opinion from Scatter and ARPS. They said, yes, you can do this. We went to the county board, and there was a hearing. And of course, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance was all supportive and pushing. There were a number of people, Republicans, who objected, and because the world was going to come to an end. But the county board did vote for it. But three things happened at that vote that I think are telling about the time. The Arlington County attorney at the time of the vote got up and walked out of the room. He did not support the legal thinking of the opinion and was not supportive of the action, and so he got up and walked out and was not present for the vote. Interestingly, Bill Newman, who was the person who created the ordinance and was so strongly behind it, also was not present and did not vote. Everybody else voted in favor. Turns out he was up for a judgeship in a few months, and in February did get that judgeship. And then the other thing was sort of personal. And I, at that time, was working for a small PR agency, and I had been working on this issue with AGLA for 2 years, and I was told by my boss that I could not speak to the press, could not speak to the Washington Post, anybody else, about this event when it occurred, because she had been advised by her boyfriend, who was a married government official, that it would not be good for business for her to be seen as employing an openly gay person. So that was the drill. But I did, after stepping down as president after 3 years for AGLA, I did join the Human Rights Commission. I was there for, I think, 12 years over 2 different stints. And we did ultimately hear cases where we sought and did get justice for LGBTQ people. And so it was a very worthwhile thing. And so I will turn it back to you, Nick.
Thank you, James. So just one follow-up question to that. What would James today tell James from the early 90s?
So a couple of things. The James of 1988 would never have believed that a community that was controlled by the closet would find a place virtually online where you can connect, where everybody can be out, where people can find one another, talk, get information, and truly be themselves and find role models. And we were so driven, everybody back then was driven by the closet and the risks that you took. And to see that change is, I think, really amazing. The other thing is I would have never dreamed that Ron and I would be able to get married at the Lincoln Memorial, which is wonderful. Almost 38 years. And that we would have made so much progress only to see it stop dead in its tracks and move backwards. And my commitment is that I am as angry and as committed today as I was in 1988, because I have to be, and I think we all have to be.
Thank you so much, James. And I am so happy to report that we can go back in time. Donnell, get up here. I'm so glad you made it. Yeah, we heard about that. Are you ready to share a few words? Are you still recovering from the drive? You got sparkling water.
Guys, I just got off work an hour ago, so
Thank you so much for being
that
here.
was somewhere around here.
However you can make it. Yeah, and so as Donnell makes his way up, going back in time a little bit to the 70s, this was the peak of when police were entrapping people in Arlington. Police aggression was increasing in many different ways, and Donnell has a very unique perspective of being a drag performer in DC starting in 1975, but having to get to and from DC from his home in Arlington. So please welcome Donnell Robinson.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. How you all this evening? I think I've seen some of you all in Giant at Penrose. Anybody go to Penrose Giant? Hey, I'm a little short black man. I'm Ella. I'm serious. So thank you all for having me here, Nick. So I moved to Arlington in this month, October 1975. I was 20 years old. So now you know my age, right? January 20th, 1955. This was it. So what happened, I grew up in the country in Warrington on a farm. My foster grandfather was a quite Caucasian man, my grandmother's second husband, and they took me under their wings after my parents divorced. And then when I was 13 years old, I decided that since I was the only child on the farm, so I decided to play in grandma's aprons and curtains like all drag queens do. And that's how it kind of started. So when I was 19, I did a drag show for my grandparents and my mother and my stepfather, who hated me, but I got through that part. And I did. And my sister, who's 7 years younger than I, she dressed me down the hallway, and I did a Helen Reddy song, Wedding Bell Blues. I never forget that. And then there was the legendary Diana Ross had just released in 1975, A Touch Me in the Morning. And I said, oh, I want to do that song somewhere someday. So as years went on, then I came out after graduation at Fork Hill High School. Anybody know that place in Warrington? Does anybody know Warrington, Virginia? Well, I grew right outside Warrington. It was a little town called Opal, which was 7 miles out of town. Anyway, to make a long story short, so then I came out at 20. I immediately came to DC, but I started the drag part when I was in the 8th grade. Yes, Flip Wilson had just released, y'all remember Flip Wilson, the Geraldine? I was Geraldine! In the 8th grade comedy contest. The school librarian was a Caucasian lady, I can't remember her name. And of course the kids thought that I was funny. Darnell, you should do that. So it was the competition. They put me together, one of my one of my classmates, big girl obviously, she wore this one red dress at least 3 times a week. And I was so fascinated, I'm like, I wonder what that would look like on me. And we weren't close, but we had classes together, so she let me borrow the dress. Now, how old are you in 8th grade? 13, 14, right. I said, girl, can I use that for the contest? She said, you going to give it back? I took it home at 13. I put a big hem in it. I don't know how I did that, put a big hem in it. The school librarian was Caucasian. She had her own hair, but she would wear wigs. And she had the same color wig with the bang. And she let me borrow her wig. I took it home. I put it in pink rollers, did the Geraldine flip, had the dress, and they put me in, the girls put some blue eyeshadow on me, as I recall, some men's sandals, and blue fishnet hose. And then I had a partner, one of my best friends, he did the male part. It was like Geraldine and like Ben Crosby or some white man like that. And I did my Geraldine skit, and of course back then, my microphone was about 6 inches, and I had to carry one of those little cases, and don't touch my boyfriend, his name is Killer. That was the Geraldine. Anyway, so I won that contest, and that was in the 8th grade. Then, of course, I did drag again my senior year in dramatic arts. Come to find out a year later, the teacher was gay. He was like British or something like that. And my name is Donnell, 2 N's, 2 L's, and he used to call me Donnell. I said, that's so white of him, you know? How did he get D-O-D-I? Anyway, so I remember one day in dramatic arts class, he had a feather boa. Does anyone here know what this is? I do, over here. Then they all knew that Darnell was not only gay, but he's going to be a drag queen. Graduated in 74, summer of 75, I moved to Arlington. Well, I came to visit in Arlington, but I actually moved in October 1975 to Barcroft Apartments on Columbia Pike. Does anyone know that's right over there somewhere, right? Barcroft. Rent, a two-bedroom apartment was $360. Yeah, I've seen it all change in 50 long years. Now, getting to the drag part, as we were talking about, I joined the Washington Academies. Does anyone know that? Does anyone remember Carl Rizzi, drag queen main dentist? Yeah. The Washington Academies? Yes. Thanks to Mother Mame in heaven, she named me Ella Fitzgerald. So that's how I really started the whole Ella. So before then, when I first started drag, my name was Sharon O'Brien. Wasn't that very Irish of me? Yeah, so she said, oh no, my dear, if you want to join the academies, you have to, back in the 70s, they did pick celebrities' names. That was a Marlo Thomas, that was a Fanny Bryce, Juliet Prowse, and da-da-da-da. So she said, you can either be Nell Carter, who was very famous at the time on Broadway, or Ella Fitzgerald. And I said, well, I think I'll take Ella Fitzgerald for $2, please. She goes, oh, you're a funny little thing, aren't you? So I joined the academies, and I was in the academies 10 years. And of course, it was the way it was set up, it was like after you had to climb the ladder to be the best, Miss Gay Universe, the best actress, King and Queen of Hearts. So there were all these fantasy titles that all the gays could have, men and women. So I was in the academies for 10 years, and then I became the first Black African-American Miss Gay Universe, thanks to Mother Mame in the academy. So you used to come to some of the functions? Yeah, it was crazy back in the 70s. So if you were a drag queen, and of course back then we were very labeled, plucked eyebrows, yeah, drag queen, whatever. So we weren't allowed, if we were going to go in drag, and the majority of the functions were on Sundays. So you would have to get in drag at your house. You had to have men's underwear on under your drag garments if you were caught or got stopped by police for red lights out, whatever, they would arrest you. And if you were in the district, it was even worse. So back in the day, we would have to get in drag, and no one knew us as our men's or boys' names. Everybody was Ella, everybody was Tina, everybody was Marla. So that didn't change until the 90s. And the Washington Academies, like I said, they had this, it was a prestigious drag king, queen pageantry where you could come in and fulfill your fantasy or your art or present, there were people on tech, people for makeup, hair, wigs, all that. And we used to do theatrical productions. It was called Showstoppers. Do you remember that, sir, from back in the day? See, they did these huge elaborate shows at the Marvin Center, somewhere in Georgetown, as I recall. I got to be in the last one. We got to do Godspell, and I was the Black Mother Angel. Did all these little angels. So the academies gave me my big start for its being more professional, how to do drag the correct way, their way. And it was hair to the ceilings and gowns to the trains. Oh, and I did makeup for the academies and Mother Mame. I was her favorite and her first African-American daughter, so I did her hair, makeup for years, right to the very end, right before we lost her 10 years ago this month. And I was very fortunate to join that group and learn. And I'm like, if I'm going to do this, this is the way I want to do it. So I started off as a comedian, and then I got more elegant, so to speak, or more professional in the early 80s before I became Miss Universe. So I started drag, and then I went to Ziegfeld's in July 4th, 1980. I was the first one to take the show to Ziegfeld's. Can you imagine that? 1980. That's crazy, July 4th, Sunday night. And back then, before it was Ziegfeld's, it was called The Other Side. for years. Before that, it was called the Washington Square when I came out in 75. So then I took the first drag show there on Sunday, July 4th, 1980. Sunday night, it was at the time, it was a lesbian bar. 500 women on Sunday night came to see Little Old Me and 4 other my fellow performers. There's only one of us left, Tina Santana. Do you remember that name? Beautiful Tina? Yeah, his name's Greg. He doesn't do drag now, but he's doing well, lives out in Herndon. And other than that, we're the only 2 left from the 70s. So I am so grateful to stand here and talk about this, but it means a lot to me, it really does. I can't believe I 50 years, what happened? Well, because of drag now, I have sciatica. Does anyone here have sciatica besides me? Don't lie, please stand and raise your hand.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I gotta ask you, what would Donnell today say to Donnell back in 1975?
Oh my God. You're going to ask me that question?
Mm-hmm.
Number 1, stay out of the rest areas. No, seriously. I would tell Donnell to have fun, live your life the best way that you know how, be vigilant, and don't be afraid, and you're going to be okay, and someone's going to love you. Thank you all.
Oh man, now we gotta talk more after that. Thank you, Donnell, so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna jump forward real quick back to the 90s. And as James touched on, 92 was a big year. It's when sexual orientation was added as a protected class to the Human Rights Ordinance here in Arlington. And in 93, we got the first openly gay candidate for Arlington County Board. And I'm happy to report that the Arlington Library Archives, they have a VHS copy of a 1993 campaign ad. And it is everything you would hope for from a queer early 90s campaign ad. And I'm really hoping that the sound plays with this. Oh no, it's not gonna play. So I'll be sure to share this with you afterwards so that you can hear the song. He's like, and then people say, "We're queer. You gotta vote to make change." And just look at this. Truly the best. When I found this, it made my life. I live for this. I've watched it so many times now.
No, this really
No? We saw you earlier. We know you look like that. Yeah, and so, look at that. So good. Thank you, Jay, for that. And so obviously with ads like that, he won the primary in a landslide, and a big part of it is because gay voters turned out. And one of the reporters at the time said that they turned out by the busloads. And while he did not go on to win the general election that year, the Democratic Party in Arlington took note of the power that gay voters had in Arlington for the first time. He ran again in 97, and even though there was some homophobic literature from the other side, it's actually amazing if you look at this. The Gay and Lesbian Alliance gives a 23% approval rating, and that was a good thing for them to promote. Even though that was happening, he won in a landslide. And it was a landmark moment for the LGBTQ community here in Arlington. But like anything with progress, especially with the queer community, it was a very uneven path moving forward. That same year, the Virginia Assembly, they doubled down on their discrimination towards same-sex unions in Virginia. And Arlington tried to introduce some domestic partner benefits for same-sex couples, but the state courts shot it down that year. But there was also good stuff that was happening. In 2001, Freddy's open, yay! We got that purple beautiful ray of sunshine. And in 2003, the Supreme Court overturned the federal sodomy laws, although Virginia didn't do it until 2014, is that right? So officially, which was, a little later in the game. But then again, 2004, Virginia, once again, they tightened the grip on same-sex unions. But when that happened, it spurred a lot of people to activism in Arlington who had not been involved in any sort of queer activism before that point, including the man featured in this article, Kevin, who he says here that I tended to keep things to myself and in private. And our next speaker, around the same time, had been keeping things to herself and in private for years, and between 2004 and 2006, all of that was about to change. So please welcome Diane Kresh, the director of Arlington Library.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. These are my props. I'll get to them in a second. Thank you, Nick, and loved your story, and Danelle, wherever you are. Just beautiful story. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on this program with all of you. And to see many familiar faces, and when he was talking earlier, Nick, about historic memorabilia, I've been here since 1958, so if you do the math, you can figure out how old I am. I've got you done all by about 6 months.
Yes, ma'am. It's all good.
Yeah, it is all good. Yes. So yes, coming out. I came out when I was about 52. After, did I hear someone go, wow? Wow. Yes, I heard you. I'm not deaf yet. And so why then? Well, why then? It's like many of us who come to these decisions, there are little signs along the way, little, things that you like to do, friends, how you show up in public, how different you want to be. I played softball. Woo! I was president of the Thespian Society. I loved Judy Garland. So, we're laughing, those are stereotypes, but to me growing up in a fairly traditional middle-class family here in Arlington, didn't know a lot of gay people, and if I did know them, they were probably not known to themselves either. So it was very much a time of go along to get along, and I, to the extent that I was possible for me also to still be myself and a little quirky and a little different. I'm also a pre-Title IX person, so I was very athletic as a young girl and young woman, and there were very few outlets for that. So there were all these indications that I probably was much more fond of young women and girls my age than I was letting on. A big moment was when I was in high school, and a classmate, I was with a younger sibling at one of his games, and I was watching, and the classmate came up to me. We knew each other, and I don't know that we were friends, but we were not friends. And he asked me about another classmate, a girl we went to school with. And then he said something to me about, well, I always thought you were a dyke. Well, I didn't know what that was. And I didn't feel like, something told me I couldn't really ask my mother. So I looked it up, and again, like many of us, we find out these things on our own. We go to the library, and we find people that we feel comfortable with, and with whom we can share confidences. And so it was many, many years of acknowledging that there were these feelings, but not willing or feeling confident enough really to do anything about them. I was married a couple of times. I have children, boys who are now in their 30s. I'm married a third time. I like to get married. But I found the right team. So my wife is Colleen, and she's someone I met here in Arlington. And her story, it's interesting. She's a little bit younger than I am. Her story is very different. Her parents were very supportive. She had a large circle of friends who were very supportive, gay and straight, of her coming out and coming to terms with it. Her journey was completely different. And I mean, I met her after I came out, but having that experience was like, huh, you know, and then, of course, hearing your story about the challenges and so many things that had to be overcome. So in some ways, I feel like I had it kind of easy. I had a good job, I had a good career, I was established, I had a good salary, so I didn't have to worry about, oh, I'm gonna lose my job, and some of the fears that other people had before me. But it was nonetheless, it was a big moment, and it was difficult. It was difficult to like call the sons in and tell them, you know, that was a little bit hard. And what I was telling Nick in the run-up to this event, that I was giving kind of signals along the way. I mean, this picture is atrocious, but I dyed my hair blonde, like blonde, like white blonde, and I wore black all the time. 52 and goth, right? And Nick wanted to see a picture. And I said, oh yeah, I've got pictures. And I found it and I was like, oh, no. Pictures are forever. It'll be on the internet. No. But I did little things like that. And I think what I was doing was, I'll subtly tell people the changes I'm going through without necessarily having to articulate them. And I think that sort of forestalled the inevitable. And then a number of years ago, it was Pride Month for Arlington County, and the then clerk of the court wanted a speaker, and she asked me, she knew I was gay, she asked me if I wanted to speak, and I said, oh yeah, I'm sure I can speak. And, well, it has to be personal. So I sat down and I actually wrote out a piece. I think it was showing a little bit earlier. It's riveting, so I highly recommend that you find it on YouTube. But it was really good exercise because it got me to go back through the years and point to signal events that, had I been paying more attention to at the time, it probably would have made me more comfortable with who I was and who I was becoming. I got there anyway, you know, it's a marathon, I got to the end. But it was not without those moments of being not so much fearful, but really doubting myself. You know, would people still respect me? Would they like me? And I was most worried, frankly, about my sons, because I didn't want them to think, oh, well, does that mean what you had with Dad was a lie or fraudulent? And, you know, and having that kind of conversation about, no, that was different and this is now, and both things can be true. My older son, his reaction to my coming out was to give me a copy of Fun Home, which was great. And my younger son just said, yeah, okay, whatever, what's for dinner? So that was that. And unfortunately, my late husband died before all of it came into full being, but he did know before he died. He had cancer, and I couldn't not reveal fully what was going on as he was going through the end of his life, and I was in essence starting a different life. So that's the story. Not very different, well, maybe different from Janelle's, but not different from a lot of us. But what I really wanted to leave everyone with this evening is, so I've been a librarian for 50 years, and I have felt no more ever the sense of urgency that people in my line of work feel now. The book banning is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's the inhumanity, it's how people are treated, it's the bullying, it's the grotesque language that is same-washed on television and in the media and on news. And I'm not on social media. It's just, you know, too toxic. But the amount of name-calling and dehumanizing that is, oh, that's just boys being boys, or that's okay, or that's fun, is very disturbing. So my colleague Victoria Dale is here with me this evening. Well, she's not with me, she's here also. Yeah, right? Right. We talk about this, and the library being the safe space. I think James was talking a lot earlier about safe spaces, and hats off, Donnell, to your librarian who loaned her wig. I mean, that's great. But I feel we did the Pride March in June. We had a big banner. We marched with Martin Luther King, DC librarians, and a few other librarians from the Northern Virginia area. But as soon as we stepped off the curb to start the march and started walking on the march, we were cheered every step of the way. And for somebody who's been in the biz as long as I have, we've gone from the bun in the hair and the cardigan and the glasses on the chain and the tissue. Fortunately, I never did that, although that's pretty close. But it was really a moment to recognize that, boy, we're in the forefront, and not that we would have asked for it, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because we have to be standing up, and I'm a public person. I have a platform, and I am not afraid to use it. That doesn't mean I'm going to weigh into political arguments, but I'm going to make sure that the staff of the library are welcoming and supportive and accepting of everyone who walks in our doors. And And we get pushback. We get pushback when we put pride flags up. We get pushback when we have the gay book displays. We had a couple of programs last week.
Which were great.
Michael Curato and a book about queer Virginia, which I highly recommend. I brought a copy of it this evening. It's excellent. It's a collection of histories and stories. But there's some group out there, Moms for Liberty or something, who had targeted the Curato program, and so the police chief let me know that, they were aware because they track this stuff, and if we encountered any difficulties that they were going to be on it. Thankfully, there weren't any, but it's sad, right, that you have to be worried about that kind of response in the community. And I mean, I'm not naive. I understand this is a different world than the one I grew up in, sadly, but it's still, we feel that it's our job to keep pushing forward. And for me, it's about making a difference. And I'm going to read something that a mom wrote to me a couple of years ago. I had just written a column about coming out and related some of my own story. I think it was for Coming Out Day. And dear Diane, I read your email today and cried happy tears. I'm the parent of a gender-expansive 11-year-old and have been reeling in response to the horrific and dangerous policies regarding transgender and non-binary children in Virginia's public schools. While kids in Arlington will hopefully not be affected, I worry about all of the vulnerable kids who will need to stay in the closet to stay safe at home and at school. Thank you for speaking out and making clear that LGBTQ plus children and adults can see themselves represented in our amazing libraries. Many thanks for making our libraries welcoming to all. Love, Dawn. So I got that in the mail a couple of years ago, and it's been taped to my monitor ever since, so that I'm reminded every day when I'm at work that this is why I'm here. I happen to be a member of this community. That is not why I do it. I do it because it is our responsibility as citizens, as neighbors, as people who care about a warm and welcoming and nurturing community. So with that, I will end. Thanks.
Real quick, what would Diane today tell Diane in 2000?
Okay, so anybody start doing this? It's hilarious. So I just happened to pick it up, and the first thing that jumped out was, who was your first LGBTQ plus celebrity crush. And do they still hold up? Diana Rigg. Diana Rigg, the Avengers, in those really cool suits. And so what would I say to Diane at age 11? Go for it.
Thank you, Diane. All right, and so once again, 2006, over the next few years, it is a roller coaster of plot twists and turns when it comes to progress in the LGBTQ community here in Arlington and Virginia. In 2006, Virginia voters passed an amendment to the state constitution that essentially banned same-sex marriage. In 2010, the Attorney General at the time told public institutions and universities that they did not have the authority to include gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression as a protected class in their policies. And thankfully, Arlingtonians had a lot to say, especially students and professors at the time, and pushed back. That same year, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and in true Freddy's fashion, they celebrated with cake that had little toy soldiers all over it, which is just the best. And over the next 4 years, the progress toward same-sex marriage equality has all these twists and turns, and it'll make your head spin. And so, to make a very long story short, it all culminated in 2014, in October of 2014, when same-sex couples were finally able to marry here in Arlington and in Virginia. Right, that's definitely worth applauding for. Now, around the same time, our next speaker was going through kind of plot twists of her own and writing plot twists and using a very creative outlet to be a reflection of their queer journey. So please welcome S.C. Neely to share a bit of their story.
Guest speaker with me. This is my daughter, Nora. I'm also going to sit because I have a broken ankle. My name's Essie, and I own an all-gay and trans therapy practice here in Arlington called LGBT Plus Counseling Collaborative. And I first moved to Arlington in 2007 to go to Marymount and just basically never left. When I moved here originally, I was very much trying to convince myself that I was still cis-het and that was the way it was supposed to be. I grew up here outside of Blacksburg in a very, very conservative evangelical religious cult, the kind where I wasn't allowed to wear pants, I wasn't allowed to cut my hair, all of the things, very gender normed. The first time I was called a lesbian, I was 6 years old, and it was the pastor of that church yelling at my father that if he wasn't a better man of Christ, I was going to turn into a lesbian. And at the time, I was like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying. I don't know what that is. First, that was pretty great, actually. But that was the first time I heard that. So as I got older, and I tried to convince myself to be more part of the values that my parents were attempting to instill on me in the church, I pushed further and further into living dual lives of being very cis-het in public and kissing my best friends at sleepovers in private. And so life became very dual for me. I fell in love with a girl in college here at Marymount. It was before same-sex marriage was legal, and she was an exchange student. She couldn't be here unless she got married, and so I attended her wedding as she got married to a boy to be able to stay in the country, and I put myself back in the closet after that. And that is when I decided to start writing romance novels. I started with, female-male romance novels, and over 10 years, from age 23 to 33, I would write 33 romance novels, and win a ton of awards for them. And I've sold close to 500,000 novels, and over that time frame, they just got gayer. They started very cis-het, and then add in a couple like gay side characters, and as I was coming into my own and figuring who I wanted to be, the stories got gayer and gayer until finally I was just writing lesbian romance novels. When I was 28, my best friend and I at the time, both of us queer at that time, I was calling myself bisexual and trying to try that bisexual to lesbian pipeline that we all know too well. And he's also queer as well. And we wanted a family, and I didn't believe in marriage at that point, after I'd already tried my first cis-het marriage and wasn't a fan. And so he and I decided we were gonna have kids together and raise a family, a little queer family of our own. So we had Nora, and I have another one, Ava, who's younger. And when I was pregnant, I was still attempting to have my parents involved in my life and my children's lives, and they're still very religious. They've moved to Florida since because they wanted to be, quote unquote, around more like-minded people. So we're not really on the same page anymore. And they said, you need to get married because we can't have grandchildren born out of wedlock. So my best friend and I decided to do that in an attempt to try and continue to make those family values go further and further. But as I realized that those things didn't actually matter, and it was really more about our happiness and the family we were creating. And as I figured it out myself more and more, and was just at that point writing lesbian romance novels, and I'd also finished grad school, one day before she was born, I took my last final, and then COVID hit. So that was really fun. And since then, I've done a lot of work as a therapist and found myself in a lot of group practices that were not queer affirming or celebratory like I wanted them to be. And I realized that I was the only gay person usually at these places. And so I was finding a lot of clients were needing more safe spaces to explore their queerness like I had needed myself. And so I decided to open a practice of only gay and trans therapists. And so I did that just shy of 2 years ago. January will be 2 years. And we're incredibly lucky and busy, and we do have a hard time. We have to keep everything really private, our address is hidden. We do get threats quite often for providing trans affirming and queer affirming healthcare to youth and anyone. So that has been difficult to manage, but I still really enjoyed it, and the space has been really important. And now, I live a block apart from her father. We co-parent really lovely together. I'm raising my children to be really in the queer community. Today when I said I was coming here, I was gonna speak on stage, Nora she's like, "Oh, are you a drag queen?" I was like, "No, there are other reasons to be on stage." I love that she knows that, so it's fantastic. And so, yeah, what else am I saying? That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Essie. Speaking of celebratory and congratulations, tonight Essie is actually with us missing another event, just awarded through the Blade.
Washington Blade just gave us the 2025 Best LGBT Owned Business in DC.
Of course, real quick, what would Essie today tell Essie back in around 2015?
I would tell Essie back then that I was going to meet a really wonderful girl and fall in love and to be really happy.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, thank you, Essie. All right, so moving along very quickly. Between 2015 and 2022, Arlington and Virginia made some great strides in LGBTQ progress when it came to policy. 2015, the Arlington County School Board unanimously voted to approve gender identity protections for students in their policy. Absolutely. And then in 2020, conversion therapy was banned in Virginia. The first southern state to do so, and in large thanks to Arlingtonian Patrick Hope. And then in 2020, Virginia became the first southern state to pass sweeping LGBTQ non-discrimination bill, which provided so many protections that the queer community here in Virginia had never experienced before. And yes, this is all worth applauding for. And then just a couple months later, Arlington County followed suit by adding gender identity as a protected basis to the Human Rights Ordinance here as a way to keep the mechanisms for enforcing that as local as possible, which was incredible. And so, yes, in sum, between 2020 and 2022, I was recently at an Equality Arlington event, and Virginia State Senator Danica Rome said that between 2020 and 2022, Virginia passed more pro-LGBTQ legislation in those 2 years than they had in the previous 400 years, which is absolutely amazing. But I think it's worth pausing for a second and reminding ourselves that, well, raise your hand if you're at least 5 years old. Perfect, I thought so, everybody in the room. In our lifetime, a lot of us have and continue to live through the discriminatory policies that the people in this picture and this picture were living through at the time. And as amazing as that progress is, we know all too well that a victory isn't a permanent victory when it comes to progress in the LGBTQ community. And to share a little bit about where we are in Arlington's LGBTQ history, the chapter that we're currently in is very uncertain, and to provide some insight onto what that chapter is and what could be next for our community, please welcome to the stage the Vice President of Equality Arlington, Samantha Perez.
Thank you. I'm torn on where to stand because the phone that's recording, this is the best angle, but that's not great for the projector.
Whatever.
Thank you. It is, man, it's humbling to be up here after all of those stories. I'm going to be a little tacky and have my notes with me. I had this book with me at the coming out day event, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you a stationary queer?" So I'm just making it part of my brand. It works. I moved to Arlington in 2022 when I was 32 years old. That math is easier than some of them that we've had. I was relatively freshly out. I grew up in a similar situation to SC in a very conservative religious area. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, in a conservative evangelical family. The places I was in, they weren't a cult, but they wanted to be when they grew up. And it was early in my life. I was 8 years old, 9 years old, the first time my mother walked in and caught me playing with her clothes. And being the type of household we were, she tried to stay calm, but I can see her trying to stay calm. And I got taken into the bedroom and read all the fun Bible passages about how, by the way, you go to hell and you destroy this country and everything that is good if you can't rein this in, so stop. Which is it's a weird thing to have in your head when you're 9 years old. But so the stakes felt very high about getting this under control, and I put a lot of good effort into it. I ended up being a Gold Star Bible kid, got all the Sunday school stickers, did the youth group leadership, and was very, very interested in the theology of masculinity because this is something I'm thinking about a lot. And I moved to the DC area after college to work at the National Institutes of Health. So that got me to this area, and that was kind of my first step away from the world, where I got to do some thinking. I was rethinking a lot of things about my upbringing, about what I believe, about the values I hold, about who I was. And it was I'd been here a while. It was in 2018. I had come a long way as far as letting go of a lot of the more, regressive parts of my upbringing. I hadn't been thinking about gender identity as much yet. I hadn't made the connections yet that, like, oh wait, I can think about this. But I have a friend who threw a Halloween party, and the theme of the Halloween party was wine and cheese and drag. And so that brought some thoughts back up, and I was like, oh wait a minute, I might not have to be scared of how excited I am for this party. And so I put together this costume. It was Princess Peach from Super Mario Brothers, and I had a friend come over, help me did my makeup. And when I got there, I overshot the theme. I was taking it much more seriously than anybody else at this point. So as soon as I walked in, most of the men there were just wearing a dress like over their clothes. One guy was wearing like an old lady moo with a wig. I had an instant realization that I have overplayed my hand. But I leaned into it, and I've been a dramatic theater kid my whole life, whatever, I'll own this. And so I thought maybe doing this party I'll get this out of my system. And it did not. Since in true closeted transgender fashion, I was like, well, it's close to Halloween and it's close to a Comic-Con, so I can get a few uses out of this costume. Early the next year, I go to these anime conventions. I was at Katsucon 2019, and so I was wearing the Princess Peach costume. Did much less drag makeup this time, and had friends help me, and it was more subtle. And my friends that were there, a couple of the girls were leaning into it, right? The guys danced on the girls tonight. And it was a joke, it was a bit, but I had this moment sitting with these friends in this, Party City princess gown at the Nando's in National Harbor, and having this moment of realizing I'm a lot happier than I think I've ever been. I'm happy in a way that I kind of always just assumed happy people were faking. And so at the end of that night, when we're getting out of our costumes, friends hand me a makeup wipe, and we're like, all right, let's clean up. And I'm standing in the Gaylord Hotel bathroom, taking my makeup off, reveling in the kind of the Milan moment of half my makeup off, and just looking at the mirror and realizing I have a lot to figure out. But that was 2019, and that was 2018, 2019 began a journey where now I'm free, I'm thinking about it, I'm experimenting more, opening up to some friends. There's only so many women's costumes you can wear to these conventions before people notice a pattern. And I end up coming out as, I end up having kind of the more official, hey, this is a gender thing conversation in 2019. As I start experimenting and coming out, it ends up, we end up during the pandemic when we're locking down, it ends up being a pretty good time to sit and think about things. You get we ended up with a lot of opportunities to just kind of answer the question of who you are when no one else is there, because no one else was there for quite a while. And so during this time when I come out, I'm not gonna. The point of this is not the whole coming out story, but in 2021 we're starting to emerge, and I've been out to my inner circle for quite a while now. Memorial Day, we ended up calling Memorial Day 2021 the coming out tour, because that's when we visited family for the first time, and came out to them. Long story short, it didn't go well, but we had come back. I had started poking around and getting involved in community stuff, in activism, by just kind of poking around at Fairfax County Democrat meetings, because that's where I lived at the time. But there was still a lot turning over, a lot of thinking, a lot of changing. But early 2022, we moved to Arlington. My office moves, and the lease was up, and we wanted to be closer to work. And so coming in 2022, I'm in Arlington, and I'm publicly out to my family and friends. I'm out at work now. I'm having this moment where it's like, okay, you know what, new place, new me. I'm feeling more confident than I have in a while. And so I start, this is the 2022 for me. It was a time of emerging into myself. I was starting to thrive again. I had been, as I was thinking of kind of, okay, so how do I present myself to the world? How do I start getting involved? How do I make things better? And in that phase, right, we were there. We saw the avalanche of good news coming out in Virginia. For the liberal leaning folks, it was in vogue, right, to be supportive. So I was just trying to make an effort to be public, be around people, be people's first trans friend, because there were still a lot of people that didn't have one. I started going to this little Methodist church in Falls Church. They had the rainbow flag out front. They've been gay affirming for quite a long time. But I could tell when I started coming, there was a lot of people. I could feel the reaction of like, we are way down the alphabet now, aren't we? And so this first year, I was just starting to introduce myself to people, to kind of just to get out, to find out who I was, to get into community as myself. These were the first groups of people I was introducing myself to as me. I got a little more involved on the politics and activism side here. I started hanging out with the Arlington Young Democrats. I went to a Pride happy hour at Freddy's. That was when I first started meeting other activism types for the first time. But there was a lot of just getting to know myself, getting to know the community, and then slowly towards the end of that year, starting to turn outward, starting to think of what can I do? How can I get involved? So it was towards the end it was at Pride that year where I first started talking with another trans friend, because while things were going well, like the atmosphere in a lot of ways was positive, but if you're paying attention to media, to conversations, to if you're just the foreshadowing of the coming age was there if you were paying attention. And so I started organizing with a friend a game night, a game night for trans folks, because we wanted trans-friendly events to hang out at. And as much as I love the trans femme DC community, there's a very particular energy. It's a lot of glamour, and it's a lot of bars and a lot of late nights with a lot of alcohol. So we were like, let's get something alternative. So I started hosting trans people to come over to my house for board games. We would do 1 month at my house, 1 month at Quincy Hall in Ballston. That Thanksgiving, we opened the door in our house for a lot of queer folks who were in situations like ours, because we didn't have a Thanksgiving to go to, and we knew a lot of people who didn't have a Thanksgiving to go to. So there was community efforts there to start stepping out into community, start providing a space. I was starting to get involved with the political folks. It was also during this year that I met Kellen, who was the president of Equality Arlington, with me. And that was when we started having conversations about ways to help queer folks kind of get into an easier pipeline to go advocate with the county, go advocate with decision makers. And so since this is Arlington, we said we should start a nonprofit about this. And I'm new to this. I am just kind of jumping in with both feet and saying yes to anything. Like, sure, I'll start a nonprofit and do advocacy, but I've done nothing like this ever. But I'm dipping my toes in. 2023 is when a lot of these organizational efforts kind of start taking off. It's a time of observing, organizing, and growing. Quality Arlington, our nonprofit, gets founded that April. We started having our kickoff parties, getting out there. I was getting more involved with the Democrats, with the political trans event was taking off and was really fun. I was getting into Methodist politics at the same time, because that year was the year that the Methodist Church was having its big votes on removing anti-LGBT language from the Book of Discipline, and so I jumped in. My church was like, oh cool, we have a policy nerd. We'll send you to conference. So I'm at the Virginia annual conference. All of a sudden, we're voting on these big historic things. So we were ramping up. And so in this time, while there was, like I said, the sinister undercurrent was there. If you were watching, a lot of the temperature, especially here in Arlington, especially in the DC area, the decision makers, the leaders, the county, like they want to help. At least on paper, want to help. We're in this wave of passing protections. We're in this wave of making things better. And so a lot of the advocacy that we get up to in Equality Arlington is finding people who want to help and showing them how to help, explaining what we need, explaining how to get there, explaining why things aren't working and how to fix it. And typically, once you make the case, they're on board. So, a lot of our early wins was we worked with the Virginia Hospital Center to convince them that LGBT culturally competent healthcare is a need in Arlington. Because as much advancements as we made, everyone here knows a lot of us leave the county to go to get healthcare. And more than one of us on our board, I'm sure plenty more in here, had to teach their doctor what PrEP was, like relatively recently. And so they included an LGBT focus group in their work from that. We advocated for funding for public health communications, because there was an STI clinic here that most people didn't even know about. And so it was a lot of work like that, a lot of hey, there's a problem, here's how we get there, and just pushing a little political willpower. There was a talk we planned on giving that I made some notes for, ended up not happening. But I called our work the last mile of activism, which is everybody kind of wants to do things, and so let's just push them and offer that last hand. And so it was an exciting time. I was involved with a lot of stuff, getting to know how to do this. Like I said, I was coming from nothing as far as involvement. I'd spent essentially the 10 years before arriving here just kind of in a dysphoric haze, and then I wake up and like a lot of us do go, well, I'm awake for the first time in 15 years. I'm gonna go change the world. And so 24 is heating up. I'm not gonna get into all the details, but I'm stepping into more roles. I end up on the board of the Arlington Young Democrats and vice president of Equality Arlington, and I am on the county Democrat steering committee, and I continue being our representative at church to the annual conference. It's a lot. There's a lot going on, but because two things are happening. 2024. One, there's a lot of victories coming, and a lot of them are in this type of work we do. We're helping run events, we're helping organize trainings, we're connecting people that, like, there's just the only missing spark was, these people need to meet each other, and these people need to realize that there are people, we're behind them. And then also, like, on doing the more political party work, we're in election mode. And so that's both a very exciting, a very terrifying, and a very exhausting year as we accomplish a lot, and on one hand things feel pretty good, and on the other hand we see the potential storm coming, because however it felt about how the election was going to go, like Diane was saying, you see the language, you see the things that people are wanting. And so 2025 is a very different year, a very different energy. While a lot of folks in the area, a lot of the leadership, a lot of people still want to help, I think I don't have to say that the air is really different now. If 2023 was observing, organizing, and growing, 24 was fighting and electing and crashing in a lot of ways. 25 is escalating, it's defending, and it's pleading. When we were doing the game night, when I first talked with a friend, I told them about two motivations I had for wanting this game night. One was obviously the social aspect. We want a place for trans folks to hang out, and it's fun to play board games with transgender people because we're a lot of fun. And the second, I said it would be nice to have a regular place and time we're meeting, because if it ever gets hot and we have to go offline, we know where to find each other. And so we organized this with just still with mostly a Discord server and text messages, but the contingency was always there. We can pull the plug. We can say, hey, same time next time. We're deleting the comms, and it could be a place that is we meet each other. We share information, we share food, we share aid. It hasn't become that yet, but we're having those conversations. And I remember talking about that with the friend talking with, I asked, this was back in 22, and I'm like, am I paranoid? Am I exaggerating this? And my friend, who is a gay Ukrainian Jewish trans man, said, no, no, you're not. And so now the work we're doing, the work I'm doing with the community is we're just trying to keep each other sane, trying to keep each other alive. We're having hey, what do we do when our healthcare becomes illegal? We're having these conversations. The work we're doing in Equality Arlington is really different now. Now the work we're doing, a lot of the work is with the school board. A lot of the work is defending Arlington from attacks from without. That's where a lot of our time and effort has gone. A lot of just trying to help keep conversations going, working with the school board, working with the ACLU, working with whoever will help, because it feels like the walls are closing in. And I know that there's a way out, but the tone is a lot scarier. Where the needs, we have more, we're thinking a lot more about security. We had, I'm sure a lot of you saw is there a picture here? Yeah, the picture up there, that was a rally we ran along with AGIA in front of the school board to encourage them to continue standing strong against the threats that were coming. And both because of the temperature of the topic and because of not having as tight a message control as the Management Society did, we got public attention at that rally. That led to Kellen had his address posted online. We had threats coming at us. I had between that and the events of the coming weeks, I had an account with 800,000 Twitter followers trying to tell the Attorney General that I was a terrorist. And it's a real different tone. And so, like I said at the beginning, it's humbling to be here because we've been in all these places before. One of the mood that strikes me so much is we see the tone of things at the beginning at the beginning of this, right, where it wasn't safe to be outside. It wasn't safe to make it publicly known at all if you were not a cisgender heterosexual person. And as I reflect on the life that I've lived, and all these branches in my life, where the type of school that I went to, when I moved, there's the universities are under attack, the libraries where we learned about who we are under attack. When I went to the NIH, the program that funded my role here doesn't exist anymore because it's too diversity focused. I look at all the choices I had, and when I first graduated, I went to Bible college for a couple of years. I thought I was going to be a preacher. This was part of the trying to figure my shit out phase, and it was a small, unaccredited, charismatic Bible college that nobody has heard of. We are starting to get slightly more claims to fame because it's the same Bible college that the guy who killed the 2 Minnesota Democratic lawmakers went to. So that's a connection now, and let's just say it was not surprising to me that school that I went to is producing political violence. But my first year there, we had a guest speaker who came from Exodus International, which is one of the larger at the time conversion therapy groups, and they came up and they gave a talk. And I got real close to signing up. And I managed to talk myself out of it, mostly not because I thought it was a bad idea, but mostly because I was rightly terrified of the idea, and I convinced myself that I had it under control. But it strikes me that every decision I had, the path where I would have not done any of this and just gone to the conversion therapy camp, and who knows if I would have made it out. All of the choices that I had were a result of the work that's been done, like in this room, to give me other choices. And there's a lot of people trying to take all of those choices away and only have left me with that one. And so I see a lot of echoes of where we've come from, and a lot of echoes of the work that is ahead of us. And the reason I'm not freaking out is because I know work like this has been done. People like this are still with us. These people, we're all still here. This has not been a very long story. And so we have a lot of exhibits here, a lot of headlines, a lot of titles for exhibits, the titles for eras. You could give headlines to all of these. And I don't know the title of this part yet. I don't know how much of a part I'll play in it, but I just know that I want to rise to the challenge if I need to. And so we'll see what the exhibit to this part looks like. I hope we get a better outcome than sometimes it feels like. But I have faith in us, and I have faith in everyone in this room. Just real quick, I would be remiss if I didn't say that if you would like to help Equality Arlington become part of this chapter in the next history, equalityarlington.org is our website. We would love your membership and your help.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Equality Arlington, for the incredible work that you're doing in the community right now. So with that wraps up the program. I want to thank personally all of you for being here, and thank you again to our incredible speakers this evening. This has been wonderful, and I hope that we're all inspired and very aware of what's happening right now and get involved in different ways. So have a great night, get home safe. Thank you for being here. Here, Coach James.
I want to say just one last thing, we haven't mentioned it, and that is the sponsor of this event is the Arlington Community Foundation. As I told members of the Community Foundation tonight, I have been so incredibly impressed by the work the foundation has done to connect with the LGBTQ community, to invest in the community, to have events like this. They had a mental health event earlier. And my thinking about the foundation has changed dramatically from what it used to be. And I just can't thank you all enough for doing what you're doing, for creating the Fund for Queer Causes, that's putting money in organizations that are losing money every day. And thank you, thank you, thank you.